If you live long enough, somebody's going to say something or do something that's going to be offensive to you and is going to cause you some hurt and is going to also cause you some pain. Sometimes you will be the one that's causing the hurt and the pain, which means there are going to be moments where you will need to be forgiven. So regardless of what side of forgiveness that you're all on, we must deal with forgiveness. So for today, I just want to focus on forgiving others. I want us to focus on what do we do when somebody hurts us? What do we do when somebody has done us wrong? How do you forgive people when they hurt you intentionally? Not accidentally, but they purposely set out to hurt you. I want to highlight these 4 things for you today. It's going to aid you in your journey on forgiving others. The first thing I want to highlight is perspective. Your perspective has to change. The journey to forgiveness begins with approaching it from the right perspective. Here's the first thing I want you to understand about forgiveness. Forgiveness is a can't and not a won't. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, I can't forgive that person. I've even said it myself. I can't forgive that person for what they've done to me. That simply is not true. It is not that you can't forgive someone, it's that you don't want to forgive that person. It's not that you can't forgive them from the hurt, you won't release them from hurting you. We must stop telling ourselves that we can't forgive. To say that you can't implies that you don't have the ability to forgive. When the truth is, you have the ability to forgive, you just don't have the desire to forgive. Those are 2 different things, ability and desire. If you want to be brutally honest with yourself today, when you say you can't forgive, it either means you choose not to forgive or you don't want to forgive, because forgiveness is a choice. The reason we know it's a choice because God actually commands us to do it. Here's one of many verses that we read on forgiveness. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. It says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as God forgave you. Be ye kind to one another. Be compassionate towards one another, forgiving each other just as Christ forgave you. Since God instructs us to forgive, that means we have a choice, whether we do it or we don't. But telling yourself that you can't forgive, it may help with your conscience, but you're not being truthful when you say, I can't forgive. You're simply refusing to forgive. And that is a choice that you make. Whether you forgive or not is your choice. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but if you cooperate with the Holy Spirit who lives in you, the Holy Spirit will give you strength and you will be able to forgive. So the first step is perspective. The second step on this journey to forgiveness is to remember. Remember. What you need to remember is this: Christ forgave you. You got to remember that. When it's time for you to forgive and to bestow forgiveness upon someone else, you have to remember Christ forgave me. Think about all the sins that you have ever committed in your life. And think about how many times God has forgiven you for those sins. There is a one-to-one relationship between sins committed and God's forgiveness. Whenever you commit a sin, God meets it with forgiveness. Think about that. When you remember how much God has forgiven you, it should make it a little bit more easier for you to forgive others. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells the parable of the unmerciful servant. So here's the short of it. This servant, he owed a debt to the king that was equivalent to $3.8 billion today. It would have taken him 200,000 years to pay off that debt. It didn't matter how long he lived, he could have never paid that debt. And the king knew it. The king forgave him the entire amount. Says, listen, it's $3.8 billion. I don't care. It's forgiven. The same servant then goes to someone who owed him $200 and showed him no mercy. Had him thrown in jail until they paid the debt off. No mercy whatsoever. Can you take a wild guess who we are in the story? We owed a sin debt to God, one which we could never repay. No matter how long we live, we can never repay that debt back to God. However, Jesus paid our sin debt, and now we are forgiven and our debt is paid in full. So when you remember this, then it does not matter how much someone else has hurt you. It will never match the sin debt that you owe God. If you can forgive